Now, I want to talk about something that has surprised me in a good way.
Okay.
I started off by saying our side does not write the history. We don't write the books, the TV, the movies, the documentaries. I mean, we're starting to a tiny bit, but it's a drop in the bucket. Your book is published by Sutherland House, which is a little bit right of center, I would call it, compared to the other.
I would say they're non-political, but they publish the right of center.
Exactly.
They're not against it.
Their boss is Ken White, who was the founding editor of the National Post, was the guy who breathed conservative life into Maclean's magazine. So he's tolerant of the right. He doesn't deride it. Any publishing house that published your trucker book, I mean, most publishers wouldn't touch it because they would not be invited to cocktail parties. I'll give your publisher credit, and obviously credit to you in the book. You've actually, you gotta give it credit when you see it. You've actually had mainstream media interviews.
Yeah.
The book has not been blacklisted this time like your trucker book.
No.
Give us some heartening news, and let's hear it.
Yeah.
Tell us the surprises, and we'll just marvel at it.
It's funny. So The Freedom Convoy was my first book, and I was so excited. I wanted to be an author for
and it crushed
so much of my life. But what had happened was the book was coming out. I cleared like 3 weeks of my schedule
to do interviews
because I knew that I was just going to be morning to night interviews. I was going to be speaking places, and then, basically
CBC would have you on.
Yeah, crickets. I did your show. I did podcasts, and I was grateful for it. It absolutely helped, but no interest at all. But the sales were through the roof. When I saw the interview request pouring in for this book, I was worried that, maybe that means it won't sell because, maybe there's an inverse relationship. But no, I've done 30 interviews with CBC. I believe it.
30. That is hard to.
I've hours
like
all
every single
CBC radio show across, or every radio station.
And are their questions at least fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, for the CBC radio ones, the questions were pretty much identical in every market because there was a script, and I don't mean that in a critical way, but they basically say, here are the main points. But I did Power and Politics and had a great time with David Cochran. I did, The House with Catherine Cullen. I slipped in a couple of references to Poilievre wanting to defund the CBC.
How did that go over?
Pretty well, because they know it too. And,
and
to be fair, I think CBC had there was one thing that worked in my favor, which was the same day my book came out, a book about Justin Trudeau came out as well. And you can't hide from one and cover the other.
Well, CBC can if they wanted to.
Yeah, but I think they would have realized that the stakes were very high. And
that's another thing, because they've got to be, maybe they're trying to be slightly better behaved because they know a new boss is coming to town.
Maybe. And I think that, generally speaking, there was a sense that I got from the reporters that I spoke to that they genuinely want to understand.
You're the first book out on the guy. And you probably had access to sources. Like if the CBC were to call me up saying, hey, what about that op-ed you co-authored with Poilievre 30 years ago? I would probably respond to get a search.
Yeah, and look, Paul Wells, who I've always gotten along with well, I did an interview on his podcast, and he had basically said, anytime I told anyone you were writing the book, they would all just roll their eyes because it's basically going to be this hagiography. And I said, well, first off, it's not. There are things in the book that I'm sure Poilievre doesn't like and things that he does like. But more crucially, because of my investment in the right-of-center world in this country, there were people who took my calls, like you said, that wouldn't have taken the call of some Toronto Star or CBC reporter. And as a result, even if you don't like Poilievre, my book has a much deeper view of who he is and what world he inhabits because of who I am.
I'm sure that every single opposition war room member of the Liberal Party has read it. And of course, the CBC, in my mind, is just an auxiliary to the Liberal Party opposition war room. So they'll all have read it out of genuine interest and to scour for things.
Yeah, the Indigo across the street from Parliament Hill has been sold out pretty much every day. They get more in there. So it's all the staffers and journalists that are going to buy them out.
CBC, give me, and I just want to hear this because I share your happiness.
Yeah,
for this.
No, the National Post ran an excerpt in an article. The Toronto Star had phenomenal coverage.
Really?
Of it. They ran, I think, 3 separate stories about it.
Had a fact.
The Globe and Mail had a review. Now, the review was not particularly favorable. It wasn't,
but at least they mentioned it. If they hated you, they'd try to starve you off.
And they published an excerpt as well.
Well, the Globe.
So no, it's been good. So I think the mainstream media realizes what's happening.
Any daytime TV?
I didn't know. I did. Well, I Power and Politics on CBC, and I did an interview on Global as well.
I'll stop pestering you. I just think it's very encouraging.
No, it is. And look, it's funny. I had someone. I did an interview with a newspaper in Ottawa, the Hill Times, And one of the questions the reporter asked is, well, on one hand, you criticize the mainstream media, but here you are using them to promote your book. And it wasn't asked in a nasty way, but I said, my issue with the mainstream media is that they are not spending time talking about these things or talking to people like me. So I would go on CBC every week if they wanted me. My frustration with them is that they're setting aside a part of the country. So I'm not going to boycott the mainstream media, irrespective of whether there's a book, because my whole point is that we need to be on that platform.